Section 8 of Recollections of a Busy Life by William B. Forwood. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 7. The Town Council. The council chamber in the town hall has of late years undergone many alterations. In my early experience it occupied only part of the present site, and at the eastern end we had a luncheon room. It was a shabby chamber, badly heated and ventilated. The mayor's chair was placed on a raised dais at the western end, and the members of the council sat at long mahogany tables running lengthwise. It was a comfortless room, and very cold in winter. The council met at 11 in the morning, adjourned for lunch at 1 o'clock, and usually completed its labors by 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But we had periods when party feeling ran high, and obstructive tactics were adopted. At such times we not infrequently sat until 10 o'clock at night. Most of these battles took place upon licensing questions in which the late Mr. Alex Balfour, Mr. Simpson, of landing stage fame, and Mr. McDougall took a leading part. It was the practice to deliver long and well-considered speeches. Some of these were excellent, many very dreary. The present conversational debates would not have been tolerated. We had some very able speakers, of whom I think the most powerful was Mr. Robert Gladstone, the elder brother of the late Premier. He seldom spoke, but when he did he gave utterance to a perfect torrent of eloquence which seemed to bear everything before it. He was a remarkable man in many ways, very tall of stature, and broad in proportion. He wore a low-crowned hat, and used to drive down in a small four-wheeled dog-cart. He delighted to give any old woman a lift, and every Saturday morning he visited the St. John's Market, and took infinite pleasure in bargaining with the market folk. Mr. J. J. Stitt was also a very fluent and effective speaker, perhaps too much after the debating society style. Mr. J. R. Jeffrey was a good speaker, so was Mr. William Earle. One of the most useful men in the council was Mr. Whiteman, who had been the surveyor to the corporation, and became a most efficient chairman of the Finance Committee. One of the most laborious members was Mr. Charles Bowring, the father of Sir William Bowring, Baronet. Mr. Bowring was for years chairman of the Health Committee. He had a big and difficult work to do, but he did it well, and was always courteous and considerate. Mr. Below was at that time chairman of the Water Committee, and was largely responsible for the Rivington water scheme. I think Mr. Sam Rathbone was one of the most cultured and able men we ever had in the council. He spoke with knowledge and much elegance, and everything he said was refined and elevating. Mr. John Yates, honest John Yates, was a frequent speaker, and always with effect. Mr. Barclay Smith was our best and most ready debater. Mr. Clark Aspinall, our most humorous speaker. The first important debate which took place in the council after I entered it was on the proposal to purchase land from Lord Sefton for the purpose of making Sefton Park. It was a prolonged discussion, and the decision arrived at shows that the council in those days was long-sighted and able to take large views and do big things. Not only was power taken to purchase land for Sefton Park, but also to make Newsham and Stanley Parks, costing in all £670,000, and this movement to provide open spaces has continued to this day, and has been supplemented by private munificence, until Liverpool is surrounded by a belt of parks and open spaces containing upwards of 1,000 acres, and in addition many churchyards have been turned into gardens, and small greens have been provided in various parts. I have often been asked if the work of the city was as well done with a council of 64 as it is now with a council of 134. I think the smaller council took a more personal interest in the work. The committees were smaller and better attended, and the council more thoroughly discussed the subjects brought before them. With the larger council and larger committees, more work and more responsibility falls upon the chairman and the permanent officials. I fear the larger and more democratic council scarcely appreciates this fact. Also, they fail to see that if you want good permanent officials, you must pay them adequately. We have, fortunately, today an excellent staff who do their work well with a full sense of their responsibility. One peculiarity of the larger council is the time given to the discussion of small matters, and the little consideration given to large questions of policy and finance. This I attribute to the fact that the council contains many representatives who have not been accustomed to deal with large affairs, and who refrain from discussing what they do not fully understand. In this respect, I think the present council shows to some disadvantage. An immense work has been done municipally during this period in remodeling and remaking Liverpool. In the 'sixties the streets of Liverpool were narrow and irregular, the paving and scavenging work was imperfectly done, the system of sewerage was antiquated, and the homes in which her working people had to live were squalid and insanitary. Cellar dwellings were very general. To change all this demanded a great effort and a large expenditure of money, but in the 70's and 80's we had men in the council capable of taking large views. Although the improvement of Liverpool has been so remarkable, it is difficult to say to whom it is mainly due. There have been so many active, public-spirited men who have given the best of their time and thought to the promotion of municipal undertakings. Liverpool has been fortunate in possessing so many sons who have taken an active interest in her welfare, and have done their work quietly and unobtrusively. The remaking of Liverpool has been accomplished in the quiet deliberation of the committee room, and not in the council chamber. The Town Hall, its hospitality. The hospitalities of the Town Hall were in my early years limited to dinners, and most of these took place in the small dining room, which will only accommodate about 40 guests. When the fleet visited Liverpool the mayor gave a ball, but these occasions were rare. To Dowager Lady Forwood, who was mayoress in 1877, the credit belongs of introducing the afternoon receptions, which have proved so great an attraction. The Town Hall and its suite of reception rooms are unique, and although built over 100 years ago, are sufficiently commodious for the social requirements of today. The late King, when Prince of Wales, on his visit to Liverpool in 1881, remarked to me that next to those in the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, he considered them the best proportioned rooms in Europe. The Lord Mayor receives an allowance of £2,000, and is in addition provided with carriages and horses. In olden time this allowance was ample, but it is no longer so, and it is impossible to maintain the traditional hospitality of the Town Hall unless the Lord Mayor expends a further £2,000 out of his own pocket, and many Lord Mayors have considerably exceeded this sum. It has often been urged that the allowance should be increased. I doubt if this is desirable. The invitations to Town Hall functions might be more strictly limited to representative people, or the entertainments might, as in Manchester, be placed in the hands of a committee, but it must not be forgotten that more is expected of the Lord Mayor in Liverpool than in other places. He is not only the head of the municipality, but of all charitable and philanthropic work. The initiation of every undertaking, national as well as local, emanates from the Town Hall. All this throws upon the Lord Mayor duties which directly and indirectly involve the dispensing of hospitality, and I do not think the citizens would wish it should be otherwise. Although Mr. Alderman Livingston was always supposed to have a candidate ready for the office of mayor, and loved to be known as the mayor maker, the finding of a candidate for the office has not always been easy. I remember in 1868 we had some difficulty. the caucus decided to invite Mr. Alderman Dover to accept the office. I was deputed to obtain Mr. Dover's consent. I found him at the Angel Hotel smoking a long churchwarden clay pipe. When I told him my mission he smiled, and replied that his acceptance was impossible, and one of the reasons he gave was that if his wife once got into the gilded coach she would never get out of it again. However, after much persuasion he accepted the office, and made a very good and very original mayor. In those days we had a series of recognized toasts at all the town hall banquets. The Queen, the Prince and Princess of Wales and the other members of the royal family, the bishop and clergy and ministers of other denominations, the army and navy and auxiliary forces, and very frequently, the good old town and the trade thereof. This was a very serious list, as it involved 2 or 3 speakers being called upon to reply for the church and the army. Mr. Dover prepared 3 speeches for each toast, which he carefully wrote out and gave to the butler, with instructions to take a careful note of those present and to hand him the speech which he considered had not been heard before by his guests. So the butler, after casting his eye over the tables, would hand a manuscript to the mayor, saying, "I think your worship number 2, Royal Family, will do this evening." At the close of his mayoralty he offered to sell his speeches to his successor, and he handed to the charities a cheque for £500, which he had saved out of his allowance as mayor. Work in the City Council. On entering the council in 1868, I was placed on the Watch Committee, and remained on that committee for 15 years. The work was of a very routine character. We had, however, an excellent chairman in Mr. F. A. Clint, and I have never forgotten the lessons I received from him in the management of a committee, and how to get the proceedings of a committee passed by the council. "Never start a hare," was his motto. "You never know how it will run, and the amount of discussion it may provoke." Another lesson which he taught me was always to take the council into your confidence. Tell them everything, and if you make a mistake, own up to it. And there can be no doubt that there is great wisdom in adopting this course. Deliberative assemblies are naturally critical and suspicious, but treat them with confidence and they will return it. Once deceive them, or keep back what they are entitled to know, and your task thereafter becomes very difficult. Mr. Alderman Livingston was the deputy chairman, and was quite a character in his way. In personal appearance he resembled Mr. Pickwick, and his ways were essentially Pickwickian. In the selection of mayors he was always very much in evidence, and he was before everything a Tory of Tories. Politics were his delight, and even when quite an old man he did not shirk attending the November ward meetings, where his oracular and often amusing speeches were greatly enjoyed by the electors. At one period during the agitation against licensees of public houses, the Watch Committee was composed of all the members of the council with Mr. S. B. Guion as chairman, and the committee met in the council chamber, but a committee of this size was too unwieldy for administrative business, and the arrangement did not last long. The burning of the landing stage. The original George's Landing Stage was replaced by a new one in 1874, and this was connected with the floating bridge and the Prince's Stage, the whole forming one floating stage, 2,200 feet in length. On the 28th of July, a few days after the completion of this work, I was attending the Watch Committee, when word reached us that the landing stage was on fire. We could scarcely believe the report, as it was about the last thing we thought likely to be burnt. We hurried down to find the report only too true. Huge volumes of dense black smoke enveloped all the approaches. The fire, commencing at the foot of the northern bridge leading to the George's Stage, spread with great rapidity. The fire engines were brought on the stage, and immense volumes of water were poured upon the burning deck, but the woodwork was so heavily impregnated with tar that the flames were irresistible. We worked all afternoon and all night, and in the end only succeeded in saving the center of the stage at the foot of the floating bridge, for a length of about 150 feet. And this was only done by cutting a wide gap at either end, over which the fire could not leap. It was very arduous, trying work, as the fumes from the tar and creosoted timber were very nauseating. The portion saved was very valuable in preserving a place for the Birkenhead boats. The other ferries had to land and embark their passengers from temporary platforms and the adjacent dock walls. End of Section 8.